Hello, my name is Marge. This channel will be dedicated to telling a few of my travel stories. The first one is actually what got me started in travel in the first place. It's called Fear of the Unknown. Frozen with fear, my dream to wander the world faded. I was desperately curious for the unknown, but also afraid of it. What I wanted was to travel the world, photographing like a gypsy, but none of my friends were interested in joining me. As I worked my minimum wage job at the photo lab in Thunder Bay, Ontario, I wondered if this was the best I could expect after years studying photography. I didn't mind printing other people's vacation pictures or explaining to customers why their severely underexposed negatives would not render the saturation that was in their memory. But after a while, I felt drawn to a deeper purpose. And it was curiosity that begged me to leave the familiar, to explore, and be immersed in another culture. I was 19 when I found the courage to apply to Canada World Youth's Cultural Exchange Program. It was a lengthy process, and after the application was filled out and the interview passed, there was still no guarantee I'd get placed. But at least I was on the list. It was spring when the phone finally rang. Mum answered it and whispered, "Canada World Youth," before handing the receiver over to me. "Hello, Marge? Are you still interested in participating in the program?" I assumed it was a follow-up call and stopped breathing when she told me there was a spot available on the Bolivia team. "You're under no obligation to take it," she explained. The genie was out of the bottle. It was the summer of 1984, and there were 21 Canadian participants in Nova Scotia taking part in our first week of orientation. While we learned about our partnering country of Bolivia, our counterparts were in the city of La Paz sorting out their travel documents. In their absence, we had lectures on Bolivian culture, politics, and other more personal subjects, like being culturally sensitive. Our group leaders wanted to ensure that we didn't dress or act inappropriately. The program hired a woman named Soledad to give us basic Spanish lessons. I was an Anglophone, and grammar, even in English of course, never made sense to me. The moment Soledad spoke of infinitives, my attention waned. Nathalie, a participant from Ottawa, was great at languages and helped with problems in grammar or vocabulary, supplying definitions to unfamiliar words in Spanish or English, and her first language was French. My challenges with Spanish began in that very first lesson, when we were told there were 2 different ways to say "I am." I was thrilled to have a choice, until I learned each one had to be used in a particular way. The first, "yo soy," is permanent, while the second, "yo estoy," is temporary. I sighed, realizing the opportunity for confusion. Struggling with grammar made me adopt Tennyson's motto for the Light Brigade: "Ours is not to reason why." Then there was the difference between being and having. In Spanish, I could not be hungry. I could be Marge in the permanent form or be sick in the temporary form, but I could never be hungry. I could only have hunger. To avoid a cerebral explosion, again, I repeated to myself, "Ours is not to reason why," and decided to memorize rather than understand. During the last class, our instructor Soledad encouraged us to practice and not to worry about making mistakes. What was important was attempting to communicate with the Bolivians and make them feel welcome. Up until now, everything seemed like theory, But with the arrival of our partner team, the adventure would begin in earnest. It was hot, and most of us Canadians were scattered about the wooden deck, taking in the sun. Around midday, there was a series of thundering booms in the distance, like a drum marking time. We all stopped to listen. The sound continued and grew louder. After a few moments, a group of young men and women appeared. They danced in ponchos and played Andean instruments as they made their way up the dusty dirt road towards us. I held tightly onto the knot in my throat, self-conscious and unwilling to be emotional in public. Others in my group were less hung up about that and cried with the dramatic arrival of our partner team. I may not have shed any tears, but the effort the Bolivian team made was really touching and motivated me to access my inner extrovert and take some initiative. It didn't matter that I only knew a few words in Spanish. I would use all of them and show the Bolivian team how much I wanted to get to know them. The Bolivians and Canadians were milling about the dining hall, waiting for lunch. Most people talked with their friends in small groups. I was petrified, but wouldn't allow myself to back down from my commitment to communicate. The Bolivian team was composed of mainly university students from the city and farmers or campesinos from the country. We had been told to be careful and culturally sensitive, especially when interacting with the farmers. They were known to be shy, humble, and especially reserved. It was because of their humble and quiet nature that I chose to speak to a farmer. There was a country fellow by himself, so I forced myself to initiate a conversation before others joined him, and I lost my nerve. I gathered up all the Spanish I had memorized and meekly began with, "How are you?" He replied and quickly returned the question. There was a pause in the conversation as I began thinking about lunch. I realized that was something I could use to carry on the conversation. I pulled out what words I had learned in Spanish. Pleased that I had remembered I couldn't be hungry, only have it, I felt a renewed confidence. Without realizing it, I'd used the word hombre when I should have used hambre. And instead of saying I had hunger, I announced I had a lot of men. Optimistically unaware of my error, my confidence increased. The weather seemed a topic I could manage. This time, I mistakenly used the permanent I am, along with the word caliente, which according to my dictionary meant hot. But instead of telling the young man I felt warm, the word caliente, together with the permanent I am, conveyed the message that I was a hot woman. Nathalie nearly fell over. She didn't come to my rescue. Instead, she interpreted my entire conversation to make sure that everyone was aware of my faux pas. I was beginning to have worldly experiences, and I hadn't yet left the familiar surroundings of my own country. The beginning chapter of my stories. I hope you enjoyed it.